power on.
This episode of TIE Fighter Renegades is dedicated to Richard Hurd. You inspired all of us, Captain Galaxy.
It's TIE Fighter Renegades, a Star Wars podcast.
Woo! It is time for TIE Fighter Renegades. The Hebrew Handsome is here, but not only that, also the Soong-type android handsome, if I may say so myself, is also here. I don't know how handsome I actually am, but anyway. But Rob has a devilish beard that, man, I one day I'll emulate. But pretty good for a Soong-type android there, Rob. How we doing, man?
Well, it makes me look more distinguished.
I'll say it does.
As Data would say.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, in a more a believable future for the character from All Good Things, right? Was that what that quote was from?
Actually, he grew a beard during the series. I think it was like maybe the second or third season.
He did. Oh, but did he? Because I know when he put the gray in his hair when he was the Isaac Newton chair at Cambridge,
right?
He said he looked distinguished. But yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah.
I think you're right.
Yeah. But there was a scene where he was testing out growing a beard in front of the mirror, and I think Geordi and Dr. Crusher there, and we're like, no, that doesn't work.
I love it. Well, anyway, it certainly works on you, man. But we've got some stuff to talk about. We're going to get into on TIE Fighter Renegades here. We have some Star Wars news that we will bring up, a little bit of reviewing, and we're actually going to talk some Star Trek later on. And then we have our picks of the month, and or picks of the episode, I should say, because sometimes, what was it, April? We did like 2 episodes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you never know. So we'll just say picks of the episode. And we'll break into those. I know certainly the one Rob has is very, very interesting. We'll get into that. But why don't let's just open this baby up. I got to admit real quick, I do miss talking about comic books, but like, I don't know, what do we have?
There hasn't been any.
Yeah, right. Maybe we had that Dr. Aphra comic, I think, that they might have released last week, but like there's been practically no comic books.
Yeah, because I looked at there's a website that shows all the comic releases, and I went through it the other day for like the last 3 or 4 weeks and hardly seen anything at all.
Yeah, the industry is still basically shut down.
Right.
I mean, that's more or less been the deal. I'll tell you something that I've been rereading Star Wars Legacy because I just need a great Star Wars sequel. And that was, I think that delivered on all fronts, and was fucking dynamite. But anyway, not to center on all that. When the comic book industry picks back up, I'm sure we'll talk about those a little bit. But something that was interesting, and I kind of wonder, I was surprised by this. So this is something you told me about, Rob. I think I had heard about it, which is a documentary series, which isn't always specifically Star Wars, as I understand it. But it's on Disney Plus, and it's called Disney Plus Galleries. And the first 4 episodes or so have been about, well, what is actually a great sequel in Star Wars land, that being The Mandalorian. And I think there's only 4 episodes as of right now. And is this only, quote unquote, let me put that in quotes, is this only available on Disney Plus, quote unquote?
Well, I mean, if you're talking about official means, then yeah. Right. But as our listeners always know, they can go source it in the public library.
Yeah. So I don't pay for Disney Plus, but I watched all 4 episodes, so take that for what you will. Man, there's things I could say. Maybe we'll talk about later. But regardless, I checked these out, and you specifically told me, I've been pretty much hands off anything Star Wars for a while. I'm interested in, is it Queen Shadow? Does that come? I think that comes out next week. Yeah. So I'll listen to that and whatever. But like
Yeah.
I have been
They had
go ahead.
a good announcement about, I guess, the actress who plays Padme in the Clone Wars is actually going to be doing the audiobook version, which is pretty cool.
Oh, well, that's fantastic. I mean, seriously, that's fantastic. And that's the way that I have it pre-ordered is the audiobook. But really, like I have been, admittedly, I mean, I can't help but hear some news in Star Wars, but I've been fairly like just not paying attention in Star Wars land so much. And with, of course, there's so many things going on. But anyway, so you had recommended to me to watch particularly episode 2 of this Disney Galleries, and I am glad you did. And like I said, now I've actually watched all 4 episodes. Have you seen all 4, Rob?
Yes, I have.
Okay. For what this is, it's good. Like, I mean, I thought it was interesting. I actually learned a lot about a lot of modern production. I mean, some of the stuff I knew from the making specials for other recent Star Wars movies, but it was actually, I thought it was actually pretty good for what it was.
Yeah. I mean,
like
other than what we're going to talk about, I was really impressed with the episode they did on the Volume, which is their new way of filming, Star Wars sets with the real time, Unreal Engine rendering in the background on an LED screen. It's really interesting. It's I think it's going to be quite disruptive when Hollywood starts up again.
Yeah, I agree. And actually, I will say this, because each episode, so like episode 1 the first episode of this Galleries had to do with the directors, which I think was interesting to highlight. The second one had to do with, wasn't the actors. The third one was the actors.
Yeah, the third one, the actors. I thought the first one was just kind of an introduction, and the second one was focusing on the directors. Am I wrong?
Okay. You might be right about that, but well, no, because the second one had Kathleen Kennedy there. So anyway, I don't recall what the second one specifically was about, but regardless, the fourth one was about special effects. And I agree. That's when they talked about the volume, which is instead of a room full of green screens, it's a room full of LCD screens, more or less, or like this area that they make. And what they were saying about it, particularly Carl Weathers, about the volume, where you could all react to an LCD screen instead of just doing make-believe in front of a blue screen. The idea that he said, like, as a team now, you all react to the same thing instead of you all just imagining something different in your head. Right. I thought that was brilliant.
Yeah.
And I was like, go ahead.
And they talked about how at times it was so convincing that they kind of lost sense of actually where they were. And that they felt very present in, this rendered scene that is supposed to look real. It looks so real that they lost track of where they were. They couldn't, find the definition between where, reality ended and the screen started.
Right. Yeah. I mean, so that is definitely, I mean, I remember first seeing this kind of technology for when they were making Rogue One and they had it around the X-Wing cockpits for the actors to react to. And I thought it was overkill at the time. I'm like, what are you doing? But now I get it. Like after seeing this and how they used it in The Mandalorian, I was like, oh, okay. No, this is definitely a game changer. I mean, and we all know the class. I was excited
about that back with Rogue One, because when I saw that, my first reaction is, oh, we're this much closer to recreating the TIE Fighter pod.
Oh, yeah, right. Just like in the game. Yes,
right.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah. Put me right in the simulator, baby. Yeah, I agree. Oh, that's a great point. The interesting thing is that they basically said about these, huge LCD screens that actors could respond to. George Lucas had that idea 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And in fact, there was a part of Skywalker Ranch where they were going to implement it. That's how far ahead of the curve he was.
Oh, yeah.
He's
10 years ahead. I mean, and I think somebody in the show
Kathleen Kennedy said that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And then they had a specific, they called it George's Garage, is because he's been talking about, he had the idea for this technology, not just 10 years ago, but like 30 years ago. Like he imagined that someday people would be able to set up something like this in a garage and be able to film anything they want.
I hope that happens. I can't imagine that they'd let that kind of tech go. I mean, because I think the entertainment industry, we could get totally sidetracked on this. I love George Lucas's dream as far as that goes. I think that's fantastic. And it fits, like, that definitely fits with what he was doing even back in the American Zoetrope days with Francis Ford Coppola, where they were being like very guerrilla filmmakers,
right?
You know? And I mean, I hope because right. His idea was that anybody could make a movie in a garage and it'd look just as good as anything in Hollywood and you'd never know the difference.
Right. And basically what he's talking about is the democratization of this kind of technology to make movies. And that's, I mean, that maybe people who aren't into movies, that doesn't seem like a big deal, but you look at what kind of effect the entertainment industry has had and has, especially right now, on our society. And that does become a very big deal when anybody has access to that.
Yeah. And I want that to happen. My only concern is that the entertainment industry itself probably would certainly not want that to happen, because we've already seen.
Well, I mean, this is, I mean, it's unfortunate. This is like, in control of Disney right now.
Right.
But I mean, yeah, George's vision was for this to basically to be essentially, he didn't put it this way, but to be open source. That was always the goal.
And this is a funny thing, right? So, I mean, just to finish my point quick is that like YouTube and, GarageBand and all these different, all this different software and online services that allow people to basically entertain the world for practically nothing on their end. I mean, the entertainment industry is paying for, I mean, like they're hurting because of that.
Right.
Okay. Now, go ahead.
That's initially where I see this going, is I could very much see YouTube setting up their own, volume recording stages at various places throughout the country. And then, having their approved list of content creators come in and make content for them.
Yeah. I mean, so this is the funny thing, though, is that, because I think the entertainment industry didn't see the disruptive power of like the internet. I mean, like David Bowie saw it, right? and nobody else listened. And he's like, no, he says, this is going to free up everything, and it kind of did. And admittedly, there's a double-edged sword there, right? And I think that Hollywood is only, or the entertainment industry as a whole, only still exists because they can still churn out, and they have a better marketing machine than the everyday person. They can still churn out higher quality stuff.
Right.
If this gets in the hands of everybody, I mean, Hollywood's just dead at that point. And in my opinion, because they already, well, anyway, we don't need to get sidetracked on that. But go ahead.
It's a really great point. And I think what we're talking about here is exactly the reason why Paramount/CBS went after Axanar. Because that's exactly the sort of thing that they were doing, was setting up their own production facilities to make their own stuff.
Yep.
And that is a threat to their industry. It's not just a threat to the Star Trek IP, it's a threat to the entire Hollywood machine.
Right. Which is why I don't know that this is ever going to be democratized. This, and it was telling. So Kathleen Kennedy, I think she said when she first got to Lucasfilm, she was stunned, and this is in these Disney galleries. She was stunned that the amount of they had Lucasfilm had 126 patents in the entertainment industry, and apparently that's unheard of. Like that's crazy. And a part of me now wonders, yeah, sure, Disney wanted Star Wars, okay, of course. But now I kind of wonder if Disney actually wanted, really, they just wanted ILM and they wanted those fucking patents.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
And not only that, I mean, honestly, I think George Lucas got shortchanged in the deal, because Pixar, which he created, got more in their sale to Disney than George Lucas got for Lucasfilm. And their whole reasoning, and basically, Bob Iger approached George Lucas about selling Lucasfilm, and initially Lucas said no.
Right.
And then at some point, I think it was just a year or two down the line, George changed his mind and came back. And this was his words. I think it's quoted in Bob Iger's, book that he came out with recently. Is that George said, "Give me the Pixar deal." And then Bob came back and basically said, "Well, we can't do that much because you don't have, production facilities already set up like Pixar does." And I'm thinking, what is he talking about? What do you think ILM is?
Yeah, I mean, Skywalker Ranch is the most advanced effects house in the world.
Yeah, so I mean, I really do. I do think George got the short end of the stick on that deal. As much as $4 billion is nothing to sneeze at.
With the stock options.
The stock options, yeah. Which I mean, that maybe be why he went along with the deal, was because of the stock options, and he's, I think, one of the largest single shareholders in the company right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Actually, I think I forget who the other big one is. It's not.
Well, there's the Steve Jobs estate.
Yeah, but there's someone else. Is it Rupert Murdoch? No.
Oh, I don't know. I don't think so.
Yeah, I forget who it is. There's someone else who. Anyway. Yeah,
but
he is one of the.
Last I heard that Steve Jobs was the prior to the Lucasfilm deal, he was the single largest shareholder. But of course, he's not one person anymore.
Yeah, no, he's a family now.
Right.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I think that this Disney gallery is very carefully crafted. Obviously, you're not going to get anything too shocking out of it unless you pay attention to more of the details and kind of read between the lines like Rob and I are. But I think it's a worthwhile watch. And episode 2, though, is the one that I think everybody should check out. And basically you want to, these run about anywhere between 25 to 35 minutes a pop. Okay. And you can watch them at 2X. I did, because who's got this kind of time? But in episode 2, when you get towards the end of it, and this is what you told me to check out, or you didn't tell me specifically what it was.
No, but that was my point. Yeah. Right. I wanted you to get to watch that.
Yeah. And so I watched this, and then it gets to Filoni just, for some reason, just unleashes on George's brilliance, what he claims is George's brilliance. And he starts talking about episode 1. He starts talking about, the Phantom Menace, starts talking about the Duel of the Fates. And it's this amazing diatribe that everybody at the table, and you've got Jon Favreau there. You've got, you have Bryce Dallas Howard, you have Deborah Chow, and you have all the directors involved, and they're just staring at him in awe as he starts rattling this off. And
they're all entranced.
Right. Because he is basically explaining the entire Star Wars saga in a way that I don't think I had ever heard before. And it was apparent, well, anyway, we have a link in the show notes. Okay. First off, check this. You got to watch it for yourself, and you got to hear it for yourself. And maybe like the thing that stunned me the most is that he basically opens up with the salvo of Qui-Gon Jinn was not political. He was not, he knew that the Jedi had gone wrong, and Qui-Gon Jinn was right, that you have to love and all this stuff. And as soon as I heard that phrase, like Qui-Gon Jinn was right, I'm like, oh my, holy shit, what is this guy going to say?
Yep. Yep.
And I mean, just excitement. And I mean, I watched this, and then of course I messaged you and said, it was like, holy shit, that diatribe at the end by Filoni. And you said, yeah, that's exactly what I wanted you to see. So, we both picked up what was getting put down. And so we put a link in the show notes from Nerdist, and it's Dave Filoni explains why the Phantom Menace is important. And I mean, it's an interesting read, but you've really got to watch the episode. I'm going to read this story here quick. If George Lucas has a successor, Star Wars fans agree that it's Dave Filoni, which you and I, Rob, have said many times. The two worked closely together for the Clone Wars, and Dave often credits George for taking him under his wing and teaching him vital lessons about both animation and filmmaking. Dave would go on to play a major role in the productions of Star Wars Rebels and The Mandalorian, and his Star Wars hasn't stopped rising since. Dave just isn't just a creator. He's also a fan of the saga who understands it almost better than anyone. In the latest episode of Disney Gallery, The Mandalorian, Dave took the time to explain George's vision behind probably the most maligned Star Wars film, The Phantom Menace, and how the fate of the entire galaxy was determined by one lightsaber battle. Dave's explanation caught the attention of none other than Ahmed Best, who portrayed Jar Jar Binks, and he shared part of the roundtable on Twitter. Listen to Dave and prepare to have your mind changed, and there's a link for it. But anyway, Ahmed Best, of course, who played Jar Jar, said, George once said to me 20 years ago that in time, people's opinions of this movie will change. Thanks to storytellers like Dave Filoni, we are now in time. Yeah, so let's see here. The Phantom Menace and Duel of Fates battle against Maul in particular, Dave explains, determined how Anakin Skywalker would find his way. He might have turned out differently if he'd had more guidance and affection from Qui-Gon Jinn. The Jedi Master could have been the father Anakin needed to keep him out of the darkness. How differently? Well, here's how. Let's see. I don't know. Anyway, you can read more of this. But that's the basic gist. Is he does give a full breakdown of what everything in Star Wars means from Duel of Fates, from Episode 1 to Return of the Jedi. He goes that far. It was brilliant. I mean, it was absolutely brilliant. Do you want to talk about it a bit, Rob?
He puts a meaning on that piece of music, Duel of the Fates, that right. I don't think anybody has ever picked up on before until now. He explains to you exactly what those fates are and what's at stake. And it's obvious when you hear it, but at the time, it's like, it's like nobody talked about this. And please, I mean, like, I know people are Twitter being what it is, there's the typical stupidity about, claiming about how stupid Star Wars fans and how uncritical they are of the medium. But please, if you can find somebody who talked about this prior to 2020 and actually pointed out all these what he's laying down here, what Dave Filoni is laying down, then tell me, because I call bullshit. Nobody picked up on it, and it's an amazing that it took this long for somebody to lay it down. And
basically go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. Basically, I mean, Filoni is saying that Duel of the Fates is representative of, there were two directions that Anakin could go. He could get trained by Obi-Wan, or he could get trained by Qui-Gon Jinn. And if he was trained by Qui-Gon Jinn, it would have been a very different scenario. And he would have experienced love, and he wouldn't have even had like a reason to go to, for a path to the dark side. Filoni's basically saying, look, the Jedi were, Filoni's, well, of course he put it in Clone Wars as well. He's saying Barriss Offee was right. He's saying that, the Jedi were not good. They had lost their way. And it was interesting because then he brings it to Return of the Jedi where, he says, Luke could have and wanted to kill the Emperor. Like, it's not like Luke didn't want to or something. No, he really, really wanted to. Right. But he realized. Go ahead.
We know that this has been talked about before, that there was a version of Return of the Jedi where Luke Skywalker takes Darth Vader's helmet off and puts it on his head, and he says, "Now I am Darth Vader." Right.
Yeah, exactly. And it's amazing because the whole time Filoni's saying, no, this is exactly what George had in mind, from the get-go. Certainly I could believe it's what he had in mind from the Phantom Menace, but the idea is that, like, it's kind of going, how to put it. I mean, you just have to watch it because it was so brilliant the way he laid it out. You can't just reiterate it in simple terms. Well, I mean, you grow beyond your father,
Yeah,
and go ahead.
He's put into words, things that just like I've felt just intrinsically and on an emotional level have never been able to put into words. I mean, there's a reason why I picked Qui-Gon Jinn as my favorite prequel character. Right. Did those questions back then. I mean, because you could see it, like the entire Star Wars saga hanged on the fate of this one character who was of the presence of mind, had the wherewithal to understand what was going on around him, but nobody else could see the truth of it. Yeah.
And it amazingly, it really makes the scene at the end of Return of the Jedi when Luke tosses the lightsaber. It's now, and I didn't think that scene could get any more powerful. But boy, is it now, because now you get the thrust behind it. and what Vader does to the Emperor at that point. Now you get the thrust behind that. Unfortunately, I think what Vader does to the Emperor is now basically meaningless,
right?
because of a Rise of Skywalker. But
yeah, and that's been my criticism from the beginning of when we first learned that Palpatine was coming back.
Right.
Is that it really does kind of cheapen or diminish the poignance of that scene.
Yeah, I mean, and
even Dave in that episode emphasizes how important that is, that the son saves the father and then the father saves the son.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and actually when he lays all that out, like, it just makes the sequel trilogy that much worse, because you're just like, God damn it, Rey didn't earn any of that.
Yeah.
Like it's just, none of that is there. None of that brilliance, none of that real meaning. Oh man, it was awesome. But then you're just like, yeah, well, that's not Star Wars now,
Yeah, I mean,
go ahead.
So I agree with you, but there's, and I know we're not, well, I want to talk about this too, but there's a small sliver of hope, in my opinion, because Dave Filoni and George Lucas with the Clone Wars, kind of, I think that body of work is what has made the prequel eras as popular as they are now.
Yes.
If it hadn't been for Clone Wars, the prequels wouldn't be talked about as reverently as they are now. And I've said it before, the Clone Wars essentially saved the prequels because it gave so much more depth and character to all of the moving parts and the storylines and how it all came together.
Absolutely.
I absolutely believe that there is a story out there, and Dave is obviously the guy to tell it, of Luke Skywalker's journey between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens. And I think if he could do that right, then maybe there is some form of redemption for the sequel series. And that's a long shot. I understand that is a long shot. But I do believe that story exists somewhere. Maybe not fully formed yet, but it exists.
No, I agree. Actually, there was an article in Forbes. If I think of it, I'll try to get the link for it. But there was an article in Forbes that seemed to be pretty clear, and it's by an idiot. I don't think his name is it Scott Mendelson. Anyway, I forget, but he's written some really dumb shit about Star Wars in the past. But he's basically in this. It's a recent article. He's basically admitting that, oh no, you know what? Actually, you know what people really wanted? They wanted Luke Skywalker to come kick some ass in the sequel trilogy, and that's really what they wanted. And nobody got that, and now everything's just kind of falling apart in Star Wars.
Yeah, but even they could have that could have been poorly executed too.
It could have. Right.
Yeah, I mean, what we really needed is to, and Dave talks about this, is ultimately what Star Wars is about family.
Yep.
And not necessarily your birth family.
Right.
It's the family you choose as well.
Yeah.
And I think that's highlighted by Rebels.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But if there was some way for them to expound on that theme in that story, with Luke Skywalker's story going forward from Return of the Jedi, then that is a story worth telling. And like I said, I think that story exists somewhere in the ether.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I really think like that's the thing you'd have to do. In fact, I'd almost argue any movie is almost bullshit to try.
Yeah. Because I tell you, one of the things,
you got to give people Luke Skywalker.
One of the things that upsets me the most about the prequel trilogy is the state of, basically the Skywalker family. Mm-hmm. From the end of the Return of the Jedi on, nobody gets a happy ending.
No.
Everybody pretty much dies horribly.
Yep.
Like I just can't imagine a world where Luke doesn't talk to his sister anymore because he's too butthurt about, what's gone down. And yeah, I could see, a version of Han Solo taking off when things get tough, but not the Han Solo that we got at the end of Return of the Jedi.
Right. Yeah, no, I hear that. Yeah, I guess I'll just second that. I think that story's out there and it's needed like now.
Yeah,
I totally agree with you.
So
yeah,
what did you think about? So the last part of that diatribe, Dave Filoni talks about George's intentions with the Star Wars saga. What did you think about that?
What exactly did he?
Well, because he used your and I'm saying this sarcastically, he used your favorite word in that the Star Wars. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Star Wars has to have hope, and we got to give it to the kids.
Right. What did you think about that?
I get it. I don't know. I mean, Star Wars really always has been about that. It's just never been so fucking blatant and cheesy about it, I guess.
Right.
I mean, fuck, like, yeah, okay, originally episode 4 wasn't called episode 4, nor was it called A New Hope. But for as long as I've existed, it's been called A New Hope. And so, it was definitely ahead of the curve on that. I don't really mind what Filoni had to say on that. I get it. And I mean, and I don't really have a problem with it. The only problem I have is that Star Wars the entertainment industry has no interest in getting out any actual real truths out there. And actually Filoni's diatribe proves the point because it shows what Lucas was trying to do that Hollywood would never try to do. Not really. In fact, I don't know. The only reason I can imagine that Disney allowed this to get out, that they allowed these words to get uttered on a screen, is because they thought maybe it would get people to like episode 1 again, or something. I don't know. That's all I've got on it. Is that I get it. Go ahead.
There's an interesting thing too. When you watch the credits for these episodes of the Disney Gallery, it lists there's basically co-executive producers. So it's credited to both Kathleen Kennedy and Dave Filoni.
That is interesting.
I think there's been a shift in power over at Lucasfilm. I've always said I don't think, and I've never thought, and I still don't think that Kathleen Kennedy is ever going to get fired. It's just not going to happen, folks. But I do think that things are shifting more towards what people have been wanting and giving Dave more creative, maybe not control, but purview over the entire franchise. He has access now.
Right. Well, that might be an interesting, if you're open to it, that might be a good segue into our second Star Wars story for this episode. Because part of this is where I want to go with it. And this other story is news that, well, I think there's a lot behind this, and I'm not the only person suggesting this. I wouldn't pretend to be. But this was a bit of a shock, I think, for some. It was news dropped really in the middle of COVID-19 news when, basically everything's just getting delayed. And I think most people are wondering, is anything new ever going to get made? And you shared this with me, Rob. We actually have a link in the show notes as well. This is from Nerdist. I haven't heard anything more beyond really since the beginning of this month of May 2020 about this. Not that surprises me.
There's been no official announcement either, as far as I know.
Yeah, I mean, they have an update on the link that says the Star Wars official Twitter account and website confirmed that Hedlund will indeed get her own Disney Plus show.
Oh, okay. So they have announced that part of it. Yeah, but there hasn't been official announcement as to what the show is.
What the hell the show is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, let's just talk about it. Leslie Hedlund, who is, I guess there's this really popular show called Russian Doll. I have no fucking clue what that is. And I don't say this as any disrespect. I don't know who she is really either. But I do think that it's a very political move to basically much like when they announced Deborah Chow, being spearheading Obi-Wan, because how this got announced was, even though this part hasn't been official, is that there's going to be a female-centric Star Wars show. That's how this was getting billed, and this is what ruffled some people's feathers. I mean, I hear that. I'm fine. I don't care.
Yeah. Well, we've been saying this for a while now.
Right. I mean, again, I really I have for a good chunk of my life said Star Wars needs a lot more women. And one of the things I've complimented Disney on is dramatically increasing the amount of female characters in Star Wars overall since they've taken over. So I don't really have a problem with a show being that, being female centric. I do think that there's some political machinations going on here, and I don't necessarily mean electoral politics, though, that's certainly part of everything these days, it seems. But I mean, Rob, how did you feel about this announcement? What are your thoughts?
Really, pretty much, my first reaction was the same as yours in that, it was not surprising, but that, it did seem very calculated and political.
Yeah.
What they're trying to achieve with this. And I also have not seen Russian Doll or any of Leslie Headland's work, so I can't comment as to whether or not she's a good or bad director. I'm open-minded as to the possibility. It could be great. Right. And like I said, Brian and I have both said, for a while now that, we need not just more female Star Wars characters, but we need more, female talent behind the camera as well.
Right. So, which is why we were so excited about Deborah Chow, which she, killed it with Mandalorian, was awesome. And as was Bryce Dallas Howard.
And I think that's why she got the job for the Obi-Wan series, is because she basically had, proven her chops to be able to do Star Wars.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, where I get a little conspiratorial about this, this was leaked. This was not confirmed. So the original, and you can look at the dates in the story, the link in the show notes. This is originally leaked on April 22nd. It was not confirmed by Lucasfilm until May 4th. And actually, I mean, I'm amazed that it was even confirmed. Me personally, and you can listen to Sovryn Tech to learn more about this kind of stuff. I mean, and also I do work in PR. I understand how this works. Leaks are controlled things. I can't even imagine where there's like a genuine leak that wasn't intentional. The last genuine leak that happened was probably the iPhone 4. Where it was really an accident, but maybe even that wasn't. Okay. And there's a theory going around that this was Kathleen Kennedy herself leaked this to somehow slap Bob Iger in the face, and to more cement her position and basically keep her from getting fired. Because, this got put out by Variety, this got put out by a bunch of different trades. And it was to more or less cement her position, because then if you go and get rid of her, oh, wait a minute, what about this show? She was going to do this, she was going to do that, blah, blah, blah. So that's a conspiracy theory, more or less. We could call it that, going around.
I mean, I have my own take on that, in that I definitely could believe that Kathleen Kennedy was behind the so-called leak, and that it is a clapback, if you will, not made necessarily at Bob Iger, but because Kathleen Kennedy has personally taken heat from elements within Hollywood for not putting more female directors behind the camera. She's been asked about this pointedly and directly in interviews with her, and she basically listed off a bunch of bullshit reasons on why that hasn't happened and why it's not happening. So I think this is CYA on her part.
Yeah. I mean, also, this could just be an investor play. In fact, the next bit, we won't get into it yet, but our next bit of news that we're going to talk about has to do with Star Trek. I mean, look, studios will announce shows to just get like investors excited, and just to like save their jobs. Like, oh no, we have this show coming. You can't cancel us yet. You can't shut us down yet. We got this coming out. And I mean, all this stuff is very carefully planned. But here's my real concern, I guess, with this. Again, I am all for a female-centric show. In fact, I mean, you have no idea how excited and supportive I am around that concept. But I think, and this speaks to Star Wars really ever since Disney took over and Kathleen Kennedy has been in charge of Lucasfilm. I think Kathleen, and actually we have quotes that from other past executives in Lucasfilm that basically confirm this. I think, and this is happening all over in Hollywood, not just Disney, but I think Kathleen Kennedy, someone's convincing these people that there is a demographic out there that they have yet to reach, that if you just appease them, they will flock to your franchise, to your movie or whatever. And, you're going to do just crazy amounts of money and you're going to be, the savior of your company or of your studio. It's the same crowd that I think that the all-female Ghostbusters was going after. It's, a lot of and look, gender flipping isn't a new thing, folks. Like, this has been being done since like the 70s. In fact, I don't know if I played it on Sovryn Tech or not, but there was a conversation between Harlan Ellison and Tom Snyder asking, how do you feel about like, gender flipping characters? I mean, so this stuff's been going on for a while, but yeah, I don't think that they understand. Like, apparently Kathleen Kennedy came right out and said that she does not want to appeal to a bunch of 50-year-olds.
Right.
Directly. And so she is looking for a new market. And the problem is, or a new demographic. And the problem is that new demographic might not exist. I'm not saying that women aren't into Star Wars or that females aren't into science fiction or that females aren't into adventure or any of this kind of stuff. Of course they are. I obviously know that for a fact. All right. But the numbers that studios have to deal in today, the millions and billions that they have to deal in today to justify any project that they come up with, you have to get so many people, asses in seats, whatever that looks like. Well, but they're rolling the dice because these demographics might not exist. Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, I do believe there is real pressure coming down from Disney onto Lucasfilm, and essentially, whether it's Bob Iger or whoever the new fuckface in charge over at Disney is saying, you're Star Wars. Star Wars was mega popular before Marvel was. Where's the Marvel money? Give us the Marvel money. Why aren't you delivering the Marvel money? Produce the Marvel money.
Well, you're right.
And so the people at Lucasfilm are going, why aren't we making Marvel money? And they're having to come up with reasons why. Well, this is their answer is that we just haven't reached this one demographic yet. And once we have, we'll deliver their Marvel money.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. Of course, there's always more than one reason for anything. But yeah, I think you're right about that. And I think actually the difference here, the reason why Marvel makes Marvel money is because in the popular consciousness, none of those characters were established. Nobody had a fucking clue who Iron Man was 20 years ago. Nobody. And I know, because I was the crazy Iron Man fan at the time that was pissed off that Iron Man didn't even have his own comic book at the time because it didn't sell enough. And I've talked about that many times. You were able to craft this subculture of Marvel from the beginning. Jon Favreau was able to do that. And understand, like, Iron Man came out before Disney owned it, right? The movie. Okay.
Right.
And they just, it kind of built up from there. But I think you raise a great point And that's the thing, is that Star Wars is in the popular consciousness. Even people that have never seen Star Wars understand Star Wars. They know the references. They get everything.
Right. That's the thing. There's
established.
There is an authenticity litmus test with Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
And they had
Marvel didn't have to pass. Marvel did not have that. Yes,
exactly. Right. Yes. And The Force Awakens came out, and that made the Marvel money with that first movie, but it didn't really 100% pass the Star Wars authenticity test with and unfortunately, it's those 50-year-old fans you gotta basically rely on to get the word out on whether or not it does pass or not.
Well, that's it. And I think this is basically kind of what you were saying earlier about Mandalorian and how we are starting to get stories that we've wanted. I think my guess is that Disney is starting to learn the lesson. And if this leak of the... Go ahead.
Because literally Dave Filoni is that 50-year-old fan. He's the guy.
Yeah.
And he'll tell you that too. Like he tells, like in those episodes of the Star Wars Galaxy, I think the first episodes, he talks about how he got interviewed for the job for, the Clone Wars and how he thought it was a joke. Somebody was playing a prank on him at first. And then when he realized that it was real, he's like, oh no, I'm the guy. You have no idea how much the guy I am.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so I think that they are finally getting to the point, and Bob, I'm going to guess Bob Iger might have even realized this, that, oh no, we can't shit on these people anymore. We have to please them. And maybe Kathleen Kennedy is trying to double down here with this, with Leslie Headland saying, well, no, I want one more shot. I can bring in this new demographic.
Exactly. This reads as a power play.
Exactly. Yes. So, and it's a point you've brought up many times, Rob, over the years to me. You've talked about it with Google. You've talked about it with other companies where they get so big that you have civil wars inside of them. Right. And
I think that happens with any organization that gets large enough. And Disney / Lucasfilm definitely is in that category.
Yeah. And I think we're watching it happen. And so I do think that the leak was definitely I do feel like there was some kind of power play being enacted by Kathleen Kennedy here. Whether or not it's to go after Bob Iger or what, I can't exactly say to that. But I will admit also that, or I will say also that I think that Hollywood in general, it's not just Kathleen Kennedy, it's not just Lucasfilm, it's not just Disney. Hollywood in general thinks that there's this other demographic out there that they can hit. And I think they're getting the hard lesson that it's not, it might not be out there. And
because I mean, you can make it, you could observe social media and maybe extrapolate that demographic exists. But if you really look closely, there's so much internal strife within that demographic that you can't really even call it a demographic once you really look at it.
Well, that's it. I mean, you're trying to get the Twitter crowd, right?
Yeah.
But guess what? The only reason there's a Twitter crowd is because Twitter's free. It doesn't cost any money. And you're wanting these people to spend money. And baby, they ain't going to spend money. They don't understand. And so, that's, again, they're going to have to realize, sure, I guess that demographic exists, but that demographic, well,
it doesn't though. Like in terms of something that you can monetize, it doesn't exist. It's not something you can market towards.
Yeah, because
in fact, if anything, that demographic is anti-marketing.
Right, they're anti-marketing, or and I say this with no insult because we live under very shitty systems, okay? But they're fucking poor, and I don't mean that as an insult. I'm just saying that they don't have any. You hear them? Yes, they're so loud on social media. That's because they're not doing anything else. They don't have any money. They can't buy all your books. And oh man,
well, it's not only that they're poor, but they're effectively people who've been screwed over by capitalism. And
exactly. Well, that's my point.
Yeah, exactly. And so then here they are. They have a corporation basically coming to them and saying, "Hey, we get it. We get you, but give us your money."
Yeah. I mean, and ultimately, I think that the bulk of the entertainment industry in Hollywood and so on, they think we're all morons. And that's not new. It's been that way for a long time. And I remember, you can actually hear Gene Roddenberry talk about this at points. Like he said, his revolutionary idea, the only revolutionary idea that Star Trek had was that we thought the person on the other side of the screen wasn't an idiot. And I thought that was great. So, yeah, so I agree with Gene Roddenberry. I mean, back in the 60s, he had to, it was revolutionary for him to treat, the viewer as intelligent. And I don't know that anyone else has ever really done that other than maybe like J. Michael Straczynski or something. Right. And I think that the bulk of them, the bulk of Hollywood, they think we're just a bunch of morons. We're the plebes, and we should be so grateful for the scraps of supposed entertainment that they give us. But again, a lot of the new demographics they're trying to reach aren't going to pay for shit. So
no.
Yeah.
And understand that in a lot of cases that's through no fault of their own.
No, I totally agree. I completely empathize.
I mean, there's a reason why we tell people to go get stuff from the public library.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And look, like, I'm glad you're not giving them money. Like yeah. Don't confuse me. Like I'm pleased as punch that they're not getting your dime. In fact, I watched a great review of the first season of Star Trek Picard. And at the end of it, the guy basically suggested, he says, so go out and get the discs, watch the stuff on disc. Do not give them their allowance money, meaning don't pay for the streaming services, because you're basically that's the studio's allowance money. Yeah. And I thought that was such a brilliant analogy, for that. So I'm glad they're not giving it to them. Yeah. I that's why I say, I don't mean to insult anybody. I'm just saying, I mean, if I'm insulting anyone, it's fucking Hollywood. It's not right. Not the people they're trying to reach. So anyway, do you want to shift gears, or do you want to? Yeah. So yeah, because I think
covered that pretty well. I mean, yeah, this is nothing we haven't said before too.
True. It just keeps coming up. Maybe they're learning finally, but I don't know. It depends if Filoni, kind of like you're predicting, if Filoni is really, if there's a sea change going on there.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I think that the announcement of this series definitely does read like a power play. And so if there is a power play going on, then you have to wonder, well, who's on the other side of that power play?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Well, speaking of announcing series as a power play, that goes perfectly into something that I cannot believe. I cannot believe that in my birthday month, even, to get the announcement of a new Star Trek show, for that to not only not excite me, but nay, depress me. I never ever thought that I would say those words. I never thought that I would ever feel that way. But fuck, here it is. Announced May 15th by Hollywood Reporter, Star Trek Pike and Spock series set at CBS All Access. Now, I don't think we have a date for when this is ever going to get done. The show is being called, or when it's going to get fully released. It's officially titled Star Trek Strange New Worlds, but it's basically covering, the time fairly or decently after The Cage, and after Discovery Season 2, following the quote-unquote adventures of Captain Pike, Spock, and, of course, Number One. 10 years ago, if you told me you're going to do this, I would have been excited as fuck. I would have been, right on board with this.
Yeah. But I would have been excited after the first couple episodes of the season 2 of Discovery until they fucked it all up.
Yeah, exactly. Because, and we talked about this, Robin, you've talked about it. I mean, Anson Mount, who is reprising his role as Captain Pike, is tremendous as Pike. I agree. I think he's great too. I think Discovery's a, flying piece of shit, but I do think that, that Pike and Anson Mount playing him is easily the best part of that. I think you've said the same. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, his portrayal, his acting, it sold me. I now accept him as Pike just as much, if not more, than Jeffrey Hunter.
Sure. And I think Rebecca Romijn as number one. I thought she did a fine job, for what that character is. Yeah. I mean, you're filling in the shoes of Majel Barrett, but she did it. And I'll admit, Ethan Peck, as on a superficial level, does an okay Spock. Like I'm all right with it. He's nowhere near as good as Zachary Quinto, in my opinion, as far as a replacement. But he's pretty good. That said,
okay. I'm not particularly impressed. In fact, when this was announced, the early word on it, or at least in the media, seemed to be focusing on is that this show is that the top name here is Spock, and not Pike.
Yeah, and
that for me kind of was like, I not with the writing involved in this show. Not only do I think, I mean, Anson Mount by himself is fantastic, but he can't carry the show with the kind of writing that we're getting out of Star Trek these days. But even if that were the case, and he's playing second fiddle to Spock, well, then this series is even less interesting and has less of a chance, in my opinion.
Yeah. So, okay. Well, I mean, another way that it's gotten billed, and I agree with you on everything you just said. Another way that it's getting billed is that it's going to be more episodic. Storylines won't go more than a couple of episodes, supposedly. And it's supposed to have a more positive tone. But there are no writers being brought on any different than people who have been in the Star Trek writing room ever since CBS, kicked everything off with Discovery. So I have no confidence. Even if they say that they're changing the tone, they're just not good writers. So, and I hate to say that, but go ahead.
Am I wrong? But didn't they say that Picard was supposed to have a more positive tone?
They said a lot of things about Picard.
I know.
It was supposed to be like a more family. It was what the tone they said it was supposed to have was supposed to be like deeper and more meaningful. And it wasn't supposed to be all action. Mm-hmm. Well, I hate to tell you folks, that show was fucking all action. I mean, that was like stupid amounts of action. Just like the end of season 2 of Discovery. And
any meaning it had was so paper thin as to be almost non-existent.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you brought up Picard. We are going to talk about that in this. But this idea that somehow now it's going to be episodic. I mean, that speaks against what Michael Chabon has said, who said there's no market for episodic television anymore. But then apparently, this is going to be episodic. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, but that guy's credibility is entirely spent now at this point, in my opinion.
I agree. Oh, I think he's.
I mean, I was willing to take him at his word, up to the beginning of before Star Trek Picard came out, but now he's spent that. It's gone.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we have no. I mean, ultimately, we can easily just say we have no confidence. As good as Rebecca Romijn is, as good as Anson Mount is, we have no reason to have any confidence in CBS's ability to produce a good Star Trek show. And it probably part of it has to do with reaching that demographic, just like we were talking about with the new Star Wars show. I think that's an element there. I think this got announced and the deal got kind of closed. Really, I mean, there's been rumor going around that CBS is hemorrhaging massive amounts of money because of the budget that they're spending on Star Trek, and it's just not working.
Well, they've been doing a bunch of deals behind the scenes too, and they're basically revamping the whole CBS All Access platform.
Yes, this summer there's supposed to be a massive refresh that they're doing.
In fact, I don't even think it's going to be called CBS All Access anymore. They've got a new name for it.
I wouldn't be surprised. So they're apparently they're losing a ton of money, and the rumor was that they were going to sell Star Trek the franchise to Netflix. Announcing shows like this is certainly this is a way to keep you from selling. It's like, oh no, we got this coming down, no pun intended, coming down the pike. Don't cancel us, don't sell it off yet. We've got this happening and blah blah blah. Even though where the hell's the Section 31 show? We were supposed to have episodes of that already, based on the original announcements of that. But regardless, this is more politicking, I think, going on. And certainly it's to get people excited while, they're, during the whole COVID-19 situation, let's just say it. But there, I have no confidence in this. I mean, do you have any thoughts, any other thoughts on this one, Rob? I mean, there's other points I want to get into, but go ahead.
I mean, I do. I think part of this is here again, where I think we're dealing with another sort of internal sort of struggle, especially now post Viacom merger. Yep. I mean, I'll just straight up the Redstones have just basically always just tolerated Star Trek.
Yeah, we know that. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So I mean, and now that I forget her name, but Sumner Redstone's daughter is basically back in charge over there. It wouldn't be surprised if one of her first thoughts coming in was, well, let's just sell Star Trek, because they've always, like I said, just tolerated it at best.
Yeah, and even when Les Moonves was in charge of CBS, he said, it's like, I don't get Star Trek, I don't understand it.
Yeah.
So that's not none of that is really a surprise. I mean, and if they did sell it, I mean, frankly, I wish they would, and they would just declare all of this to be fan fiction, but I don't know if that's going to happen.
Yeah. Well, that would depend on who they sold it to too. And
good point.
Yeah. And certainly we could think of better homes for it than fucking Netflix.
Oh, I mean, I don't want Amazon to own anything else, but fuck, I know they do Star Trek right.
Yeah.
They would. Look what they did. They did great by The Expanse.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and I was thinking that earlier when you were talking about, shows that actually treat their audience with some degree of intelligence. That's at least one modern example of that.
Yeah, but I mean, that raises, but the Expanse is such a great point to bring or example to bring up, because Sci-Fi Channel was like, well, but it's not bringing in people, so it's not doing enough viewers for us, so we're going to get rid of it. You had to have the richest man in the world buy the show and produce it with his pocket money,
right,
just to allow it to exist.
And that's because he liked books.
Exactly.
That was the only reason that deal happened.
Exactly, and we know for a fact Bezos loves Star Trek.
Yeah.
I mean, he was in Star Trek Beyond. He was an extra by request. And there's really very little fanfare around it. It's just something he wanted to do, I guess. But that's what it takes, is that to make great shit, you can't worry about those numbers. You can't worry about viewers. You can't worry about any of that. Go ahead.
We've talked about this too, but it also takes somebody who has a degree of creative control, that has a vision for it.
Yes.
Star Trek doesn't have a Dave Filoni.
No, it has Alex Kurtzman, and that's pretty much the antithesis.
Yeah,
of Filoni.
He's got an anti-vision,
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah. All right. So an interesting thing, a couple things on this that I kind of want to get into. One of the age-old, and you've been around for a while like me, Rob. I mean, one of the age-old arguments in Star Trek is, and maybe we've talked about this in previous episodes of TIE Fighter Renegades, I don't recall, but the age-old argument is like, who's better, Kirk or Picard, right? Right now, and in fact, you can find the tweets of this, Kirk has become everybody's favorite again, because, at least among Star Trek fans, because Picard was so horrible. I'm amazed at the amount of tweets, about this situation. I think that the whole Kirk Picard dichotomy is actually off base. I think I have said this before, but basically Star Trek is the story of Spock. Like, Spock is Star Trek. And I think that he's not only the central character, he is the promise of Star Trek. Like, he is an example of what the future can be, especially when you get to Spock of, say, Star Trek 6. Right. And I think J.J. Abrams knew that, which I got to get, or somebody who was writing for the J.J. Abrams movies knew that, no, Spock is the heart of Star Trek. If you have Spock, people will buy. And that's why a lot of fans were okay. I mean, a lot of them weren't okay with it either with the remake, but a lot of fans were okay with it because like, well, we got Leonard Nimoy, you know, all right, let's do it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that CBS has fucked that character up so much,
yeah.
and has ruined. I mean, from making him violent, from so many different things, they've really ruined that character. That's why even if the centers around Spock, I have no interest because the CBS version of Spock is, you know, it just shits on the character.
Yeah, well, that was what I was really trying to get to when I said I was less interested
right.
if Spock is headlining the show. Is because it's it's not that I have a problem with the character Spock. I agree with everything you just said about the character, but CBS's version of Spock is it's garbage.
Yeah, absolutely. So, but I think a lot of people got and with what happened with Picard and everything, it just drives that point home more for me about just how core and how important and how Spock is really like the great character in Star Trek. And
yeah.
even like Kirk might not even be as interesting without Spock. Though I will say this, like, I don't know where Picard, where the show Star Trek Picard, I know where it went wrong, but I don't know who exactly like allowed it to go so wrong. We talked about this last time. Go ahead.
I'll say this. You know, I agree with you that there's so much false dichotomy of, you know, Kirk versus Picard. But even so, if there is an inheritor to Spock's legacy in the Next Generation, it's Data.
Yes.
And I think the way that they screwed up Data and Picard is far worse a crime than what they did with Picard himself.
Absolutely.
Like I really wish Brent Spiner had stuck to his guns and said that he was never going to reprise the role ever again. Yeah. Apparently they just, you know, I can understand. Maybe he needed the money because times are tough right now. And I don't exactly see him getting a whole lot of work.
Yeah. Yeah. That's certainly that's fair. Yeah, look, it's just, I just want to say Picard was just so bad that I just can't get excited about anything new Star Trek. I can watch all old Star Trek till I'm blue in the face, you know, like nonstop all the time. It was just so bad. I can't get excited about a single announcement. They dropped the ball. That was just the only chance you could possibly have. We all wanted, and this is, I guess, another point I want to get into, or that I wanted to get to. Everybody was saying, oh, there should be a Pike show. There should be a Pike show. And now they're giving it to us. And I think they even know, wow, we really fucked up with Picard. Like we did not do well with that. And, you know, fuck Will Wheaton for saying he loved the show. You're a fucking liar. I mean, it's not possible.
That guy is, I could say so much. He is the corporate toady.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean he'll and I don't want to begrudge anybody doing shit for money. I mean, you know, like in these trying times, right?
Well, he's one of these people. Like we were talking before the show started about how kind of, you know, a lot of people say that, you know, being a nerd has become popular now, and Brian and I are more of the opinion that it's more so that the normies have co-opted nerddom, and Will Wheaton is the poster child for the co-opting of the nerddom and trying to monetize it and turning it into something that churns out money on a regular.
Preach. Yeah, there it is. I agree with you completely. Yeah, CBS just can't do this right. And I get it. Like they're putting so much money into this that they have to get so many people to watch it and to subscribe, but it's just crashing and burning. And I don't know if the show's ever going to actually get off the ground. I can't really picture it. Now, it did get me thinking. This, along with what happened with Picard and some other things, it did get me thinking about things. I mean, part of where CBS fails with Star Trek is that they just have like these really, really wacky impossibilities, you know, like even the spore drive. Or the 10,000 shuttles that come out of the ass of the Enterprise at the end of season 2 of Discovery. Like you literally don't have the mass to hold that many shuttles. That's impossible. But okay. And a lot of these other things. And I get that there have been some weird ideas. Basically, this is something I want to run by you, Rob. I forgot just how strange some of the first 2 seasons of Star Trek The Next Generation were.
Oh, yeah.
And they are far out shit that are, and I'm not necessarily saying that what the concepts, which they played off as scientific, I'm not necessarily saying that that they were wrong or that I don't agree with them or something like that. But there was some really whacked out crap in that. Do you remember Nagilum from where Silence Has Lease? It was. That
sounds so familiar. It's not coming to my mind immediately.
Right. Well, it was this like talking cloud in space.
Yes. Okay. Yes. Now I remember. Yes, the one that was trying to run experiments on the crew of the Enterprise.
Exactly. Right. It's really, they said, well, it exists outside of the universe, is not, and Data even says, wait, is not being in a dimension in itself. And there was really, really far fucking out stuff that they were saying in that I'll admit are actually a lot crazier than the spore drive or spore space or whatever that crap was that they were exploring in Discovery. And that's the same episode where Picard talks about death, and he doesn't think that you just die. He just says that we can't really explain it. Then there was the Traveler, right? From Tau Alpha C, who came right out and said that thought is the basis of reality. And Picard said, you're right. And this is far. It's not like Star Trek has ever done crazy shit, because I know a lot of people are leveling against CBS saying, well, they're just the stuff that the storylines and the concepts they're coming up with are just nuts. No, Star Trek's had its nuts ideas for a good long while.
Yeah. Well, okay.
Go ahead.
I see. Here's the only thing that gives me a small glimmer of hope with this Strange New World series is if they actually put a hard limit on it and make it an episodic series where it's one story, one episode. If they actually do that, then there's something to work with there, because that was the thing about the episodic Star Trek is that in a way you can almost contain and quarantine some of these crazier ideas.
Yes.
Prime example, the episode of Threshold from Star Trek Voyager, which is pretty much universally reviled.
Right.
But but we can accept it and move on because it's an episode. It's a single episode that doesn't get referenced again and isn't part of some greater Star Trek tapestry.
That is, yeah, you're totally spot on with that. And I know, even Michael Chabon has kind of admitted that, but more to do with characters than overall story arcs. In that, okay, a character can have a dark time for an episode, but you can't make it the whole show.
Well, this really highlighted for me because I saw a post on Reddit the other day where somebody was basically saying, I've heard Picard is kind of crap, but there are a few things that are good about it. Just point me towards the good episodes and I'll only watch those. And I'm like, you can't really do that.
Oh, right.
Because it's a goddamn soap opera.
Yeah, no.
If you only watch 2 or 3 episodes of the entire season, you're missing a ton of context and you're going to be going, well, what's this about? What are these characters talking about? Because every episode relies on the one app previous to it to move the story forward.
Yeah. No, I agree. Because look, there's episodes of The Next Generation. I'll just say that in comparison to other Star Trek, sucks. They're anything written by Joe Menosky, put that dumpster fire somewhere. You get Data wearing a sun mask and Picard pretending he's the moon. Wait a minute. and so, again, Star Trek can do some really wacky shit, but I think you raised the point, Rob, is that as long as you can quarantine those episodes, terrible use of the word right now, not very sensitive, but that's all right.
Whatever.
Yeah, what the hell? God damn it. It's our show. But yeah, if you can quarantine those terrible elements, all right, then fine. Then you move on.
Right. But here's the thing: is I have zero confidence that Strange New Worlds will actually stick to that and actually do an episodic format. I don't have the confidence that they can do it. I think they rely on this soap opera style storytelling that it's an old hat trick for them, and it's the only pony they got, and they're gonna ride it come hell or high water.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. Man. Well, I don't have a whole lot else to say on it, but and I think like my point too with like the fact that there used to be some weird ass episodes of The Next Generation. Was just to say, like, it's not that I'm necessarily opposed to that. That's fine if they want to go far out. Like, okay. But they've got to do what you're saying, Rob. I agree with you completely. And then maybe they've got a shot, but I don't know. I still look at all this stuff as fan fiction. I mean, everything CBS has done, Enterprise ended it, and then there it is.
Well, that's why fan fiction works too, is because you don't have to take it as gospel.
Right.
Here again, you can isolate that from the greater body of Star Trek.
Thank you for not saying quarantine. Yeah. No, right. Yeah, you can isolate it from the greater franchise. Gene was so brilliant in making sure that the novels were very clearly stated where they were on the pecking order,
Mm-hmm.
That was because actually that's another thing that's happening is that these novels, like supposedly being canon and then just being completely ignored, that's hurting CBS's case. It's not helping.
It's a good point too, even with Star Wars, because people used to bitch and moan about the different levels of canon in Star Wars. You had G canon, C canon, and all these other forms of canon. And back in the day, people complained about this endlessly. And now all I'm going to say is, how do you feel about it now? You miss me yet?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, because I think Disney's hurting I think all of them trying to create this cohesive canon, they're all hurting for it because they can't manage it.
Right.
That's why
Kathleen Kennedy saying things like, well, maybe trilogies are just too difficult to do.
That's outrageous. No, they're not. We have plenty of examples. But yeah, I mean, like what you have to, the only way you can do it is like you said, Rob, you got to have a vision person, because so like Straczynski with Babylon 5, okay, like all this stuff's canon, and he lays it out perfectly, and there's canon in comics, there's canon in novels and so on. And he lays it out, and then there it is. And it works as a cohesive whole, but then he wrote most of it.
Yeah.
And that's what you need. That's the only way that works. You cannot bring in all these disparate parties.
That's the same thing with The Expanse too, is because, the two writers that make up James S.A. Corey are producers on the show.
Right.
They're there when the film is when the episodes are being shot.
Yeah. You've got to have everybody involved for it to feel, or you've got to have the creators involved for it to feel cohesive, or a vision person.
Yeah. So at least somebody who gets it, like I said, I mean, we're extremely lucky that, George is and was around, basically hand down that, level of knowledge that Dave Filoni now has, right, and level of understanding he has, that Star Wars can live on for another generation or for however long that he lives.
Yeah.
Star Trek doesn't have that.
No, not anymore. And you certainly had guys that could pull it off, like Manny Cotto.
Absolutely. Or Stephen Ira.
Yes, right. I mean, you have people that could, but well, for whatever. Yeah. Anyway, we could talk forever about that.
Yeah.
So
lamenting over what was, as usual.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. I'm glad there's so much of it because we get to enjoy that.
Yeah. I mean, if you're. Hey folks, if you're jonesing for some classic Trek, maybe something you haven't checked out is the old DOS Star Trek video games, the 25th anniversary and Judgment Rights. There's some good classic Trek for you right there, and even works. It's even set in an episode of format, and they even make references to stuff that happens on later on in Trek. I mean, you don't realize like how good the writing on those games were. Those were people who were passionate about Star Trek.
Yeah, and again, they come with all the original cast, do the voice acting for them, and it sounds good because the writing was spot on. Like it was written by people who understood the characters.
Yeah, so go pick them up on GOG or whatever,
Yeah, I agree with you completely on that. That's a great recommendation. Well, while we're making recommendations, want to get in our picks for the episode?
Yeah, absolutely. You want to go first?
Sure, yeah, I'll go first. Speaking of something that fortunately hasn't been tarnished yet by modern Hollywood, even though they've certainly been interested in it. Quantum Leap. I'm a huge fan of Quantum Leap. Scott Bakula, I mean, it's certainly what kind of turned him into just the guy's just a walking masterpiece, in my opinion. Just phenomenal. And I think the show still holds up very, very well. And I think most people know what Quantum Leap is, even if they've never watched it. They know about it's the guy who like leaps into other people's bodies and so on. Anyway, it went a good 5 years. I think there have been attempts to remake it. I'm glad that they haven't happened because they would just fuck it up. But somebody did a Kickstarter in 2016. Actually, the guy's name is Matt Dale, where he loved Quantum Leap so much, he wanted to basically write the Quantum Leap encyclopedia. And the Kickstarter was successful. And anybody that funded the Kickstarter got a color edition of the book that he was writing, which is called Beyond the Mirror Image, The Observer's Guide to Quantum Leap. Now, you can get this book still, even though it came out in 2017, but you get it made to order and it's no longer in color. That doesn't really bother me. But it's a massive tome. It's almost 800 pages. It has a complete episode guide, has a complete timeline. It also covers all of the novels, all of the comic books. It tries to put everything into like a more canon, like cohesive whole. This is a tremendous work. Every show should have a book, or every franchise should have a book like this. It's basically an encyclopedia for Quantum Leap, which went 5 years. And there's things in it that I had no idea about that blew my mind. Like I never realized there was the episode so Donald Belisario, who made Quantum Leap, he worked on another one of my favorite shows of all time, that being Battlestar Galactica from 1978. And there was an episode of Battlestar Galactica where Apollo, the character Apollo, works with these, we'll just call them the beings of light. Okay. And the premise of the episode is almost exactly Quantum Leap. And I never realized it. I never put those two things together. And I was absolutely stunned by the fact, like Apollo has to, more or less like get put into somebody like he's somebody else, by the ship of lights or the people on the ship of lights. And it really does smack of Quantum Leap. And I wouldn't have, again, as much as I've watched Battlestar Galactica and Quantum Leap, I never realized, wow, those are really the two same things. And Donald Belisario worked on both. So kudos to that for Quantum Leap coming out of another great show. But anyway, do check this book out. I think it runs about $40 you have to get it on lulu.com. Because again, they print them to order, but I think it's well worth the money. And look up a coupon code or something at search engine.
In fact, Brian showed me that. I'm looking at it, and
yeah,
I got to tell you, if you're like us, and thick books really get you going, you want this on your shelf.
Yeah. I mean, exactly. It is one thick book right there. That does get me excited. Yeah, but just a tremendous, I mean, the amount of trivia and just everything, like all the weird stuff in production that happened. I mean, it is a one-stop shop. And I have lots of Quantum Leap making books, but none of them compare to this. It really is something. So Beyond the Mirror Image, definitely check that out. Rob, all right, what do you got, man?
So I got something that apparently like passed me by when I was a kid and didn't really even discover until just a week or two ago from a friend of mine who's actually like, I don't know if he's still a listener, but if you're out there, hopefully you know who you are. And thank you for pointing me in the direction of this movie. It's actually an animated movie from 1983 called Rock and Rule. And it was, it's exactly what it sounds like too. I mean, it lives up to the name. And unfortunately at the time, it was just like a complete flop. I think they spent about $8 million making it, and it only pulled in like 40,000 and when it was in the theaters. And I don't know why, because this movie really does have just so much going for it. I mean, it's set in a sort of like science fiction post-apocalyptic, sort of setting where like the human race has died off because of, thermonuclear war, and there are like these the population is now made up of like these human animal hybrid creatures. But anyway, the show is kind of, or I should say the movie is centered around basically these characters who are musicians. And I don't want to give away too much of the premise, but I mean, well, let me just, give you an idea of the talent involved. So this actually has like musical artists from the 80s who lended their voice and musical talents to the movie. And so you've got people like Iggy Pop and Debbie Harry, Cheap Trick, and Earth, Wind, and Fire.
Yeah, I mean, the soundtrack alone is worth listening to.
Yeah, and unfortunately, there is no actual soundtrack for the movie that you can get, because like the song that that the movie ends on has apparently never been released, which is by Deborah Harry. It's a beautiful song. I mean, I love it. Mm-hmm. And like I said, and the main villain, I love the villain in this movie because he's kind of like a cross between Mick Jagger and David Bowie.
It's brilliant. Yeah,
it is. It is brilliant. And like I said, if you're into science fiction and post-apocalyptic and rock and roll and like demons and shit like that, like this movie it's got it all.
This is perfect for Sovereign Tech listeners.
It really is. Yeah. Like it's like I can't believe I'd never heard of this movie before. And it's definitely up, both, Brian and mine's alley. And I'd certainly, encourage everybody who's listening to check it out. Cause it is really just kind of like I think it deserves a revival. It could be a sleeper hit in these days.
Yeah, this is one I've wanted on Blu-ray for a while. It's actually very rare Blu-ray. It's one of those rarer releases out there, kind of like Wizards and some of the other animated films. I feel like in the 80s, Hollywood was trying to see, hey, can we do what they're doing in Japan, where animated films are adult and make an ass ton of money? And because a lot of these, I feel like really failed. I mean, you think like The Black Cauldron, Flight of the Dragons.
Right. Well, they were all way ahead of their time. I mean, like at the time, adults weren't willing to take animation seriously. Now it's given, like with The Simpsons and all that kind of stuff, adults watch animation all the time now. And, nobody calls them out for, acting like children because, it's actually good content.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of these 80s kind of fantasy films almost that Heavy Metal, of course, comes to mind for a lot of people, but that I think are really worth checking out. Like, I love Fire and Ice. I think that's a brilliant film, gorgeous animated movie. Or even something a little more popular like G.I. Joe, the movie, or Transformers, the movie that came out in the 80s. Those were very grown up and had star-studded casts. They were legit. Rock and Roll is just one of those. Yeah, I do feel like it's one of the less popular ones. It's a little under the radar, but once you know about it, you never forget it. And it really is that good. That's a tremendous pick, Rob.
And just anybody that's looking for it. I mean, the like Brian mentioned, like the it's kind of a rare movie. In fact, the physical formats actually go anywhere from like $100 to like $300.
Yep.
Now I will say you can get it legitimately through Amazon Prime, but the ask price is $20, which is kind of high for me in terms of streaming. But so crazy. But I will say that I did watch it online. If you want to look for the tube where this is located, you can find it very easily.
The reason I think it costs like $20, I bet it's because of the licensing rights. Because you got to pay Cheap Trick, you got to pay all those artists. Yeah, that's got to be why that costs so much. On the streaming side, on the physical side, it's due more to the rarity. But even the reason why it's so rarely released is because you got to pay those licensing fees. And what a pain. Anyway, great pick, Rob. So check all of that out, and I guess we'll leave it off with that. I don't think we need to do a barometer check on Star Wars necessarily.
No, let's end the show on a good note.
Rock and rule.
Rock and rule.
Yeah. Take a quantum leap and rock and roll. I love it. So great picks there. Anyway, we'll wrap up this episode of TIE Fighter Renegades, and we will be back with much more because there's always news. And you know what? If there isn't news, we're going to go digging deep into those classics. We still got to review the Star Lost. I know. Oh, you know what we didn't talk about? Holy shit, we didn't get this episode, and I'll make sure it's at the top. This episode is dedicated to Richard Hurd, who passed away just a few days ago. Man, that guy was in fucking everything, wasn't he?
Yeah. Well,
go ahead.
V?
Yep. He played John in V. Awesome. Star Trek, Sequest. In fact, that's really where I know him best from. More other than V is Sequest. He played Admiral Noyes. He was tremendous in that. He's like, I've never seen him young. I don't know what the fuck he looks like young. I was actually kind of surprised that he was still, alive. But
because he wasn't young when he did a lot of these things. So
right. And we're talking stuff 30, 40 years ago.
Right. Talk about stuff that, deserves a lot of play today, especially given, the circumstances.
V?
Yeah.
Oh, hell yes.
Yeah. Like the dedication at the beginning of the original miniseries is something you will never see on television ever again.
To all the resistance fighters around the world for all time. Yeah, it's just you're never going to hear that today.
Future, yeah,
you're never going to hear that today.
No.
Yeah, that was brilliant. Kenneth Johnson really delivered on that one. Man, yeah, but Richard Hurd, just a part of all the big franchises. Always, talk about a literal commanding presence. He always seemed to play a leader or admiral, but he just delivered on that. You totally believed him the instant that he did that. Or that he was in one of those roles. So I totally understand. I completely. Oh wait, didn't he play Tom Paris's father in Voyager?
Yes, he did. Yes. Oh. Yeah, it was Admiral Paris. Yeah.
Tremendous. Just a great actor. And I always loved seeing him on screen, regardless of franchise. So so
iconic that he basically, set the template for Trump memes these days.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm looking at it online. There's literally murals of Trump dressed up in the visitor's red garb and wearing the sunglasses.
Yeah. See, we're so rest in peace, Richard Hurd. But we're going to talk about V at some point because that franchise is as important today, I think, as it's ever was.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I'll just say this quickly. I took V so seriously. I had black Converse shoes in high school, and this is 15 years after V was even a thing. And I took red nail polish and just put like a V on the side of my black Converse shoes in high school in the 90s because I was just like, yeah, this is so fucking great. When I finally got to see it, but it's that I don't do that often, but that was one of those franchises that just inspired me so much. I thought it was so brilliant. So anyway, we'll get to that in the future episode, but for this episode, you've got us. That's the end of it. And we will see all of you on the other side.